Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about safety manipulation on the AK, and we're also going to talk about stoppages, and I'm going to try and keep it as condensed into that as possible. I'm out here. It's obviously pretty crap outside. The rain chilled out for just a second so that I could talk more about this. I ran out just to shoot like a small group to start, and that turned into like a whole magazine at the head at 100. Just to see where my barrel is at after 25,000 rounds. Because I am a carbon cleaner, not a copper cleaner. Unless I start seeing a bunch of green stuff on my muzzle device, then I'm going at the copper. It's just not a whole lot. Because I like keeping the lining in there, and I like keeping things as consistent as possible, so there aren't like a billion variables that I have to deal with as far as just firing those first few rounds. That's a whole magazine. I'm not going terribly slow, or really hardly that slow at all. It's hard to go slow on this rifle. Like, first shot was this guy. I only remember this because it's like sort of isolated from the rest. The rest sort of strung up a little bit in this area. That's where those other four are. And then obviously the rest of the magazine at 100 on a rifle that's been shot 25,000 times. So barrel's good. It's doing fine. For those of you that asked how the barrel is doing after 25,000 rounds. So today, I'm really kind of harping on this mostly because I see a lot of AKs that come through class, and I see a lot of standard safety levers. First thing, a lot of people that ask me about safety levers on AKs and why I don't use a Krebs. It's nothing on the Krebs itself, honestly, but there's a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't see them a lot, right? So if I don't see them a lot and guys come out with AKs and that kind of stuff, I want to show them more effectively, how to use their own safety lever, which is a standard one. Number two, and this, I know this is a training issue. I know this is like a preference deal. And I know guys that use a Krebs custom safety levers and similar ones to them absolutely rock the house with them. But the shelf that is down here that guys used to just sweep down, for me personally, especially when I'm really running AKs, I tend to push the safety lever back up when I'm really messing around with them and I'm in deep positions and, balled up and working cover and all that crap. Especially around cars for some reason. I tend to really sweep that safety lever back upwards. I know that this is two parts. A, me getting up into my crap and doing things I probably shouldn't as far as that safety lever is concerned. And two, it's just a posture of my own trigger finger just immediately coming out like so. Because if I'm in here and I'm doing work and I instantly move up here, I know it shades really close to the receiver and that pops safety levers up. Third, I like tighter safety levers, and in order for those to work really well, I've noticed that they require you to get them a little bit more loose, which it's not a problem. It's not anything knocking the safety lever at all. It's a good piece of kit. It really is. It's just my personal preferences. I like tighter safety levers, and I like stuff out of the way when it comes to my rifle not working anymore, or my pistol, or whatever I'm using. So if I'm going to take the gun out of action, I want it to be a very specific, very deliberate action, which is why a lot of times when you guys see me shooting left-handed with an AR, for instance, you're watching me use my trigger finger to snick safety levers back on, right? And right-handed, I'm doing the whole AR wave with the thumb, right? Just snicking with the thumb and doing the whole wave because I'm taking a rifle out of action, right? So anything that's closer to that for me personally, that's why I just don't use them. Third, if we prep these safeties proper, my response time off of a shot timer is typically mid to low 0.4s. So 0.45, 0.42, 0.41, something like that. Unless I'm shooting at something that's farther away. So if it's similar to my AR response times, I'm going to call it okay. And it suits my individual preferences, so there you go. So let's talk about safety lever manipulation. We see a lot of guys that will try and hang on to the pistol grip as much as possible and try to use their index finger, which never works. And then they try to keep, a couple of their digits in contact with the safety lever while trying to use their middle finger to sweep that guy off. There's a couple of problems with just keeping these two digits wrapped up in here. It deletes most of your leverage. And two, I don't have the longest fingers in the world. They're fairly average. I wear a medium glove. I don't have a whole lot of purchasing power on that. So if it's raining like this and I've been out training all day, or if it's really cold, just something that makes everything sharp. If I don't have as much purchasing power on that safety lever, it's not going to work with me the way that I want it to. And that is, if I want the safety off, it's off. And if I want it on, it's on. So for me personally, I just tell people, look, the gun doesn't work right now. In order to make the gun work, let's focus on making the gun work, and then we can talk about everything else. So for me personally, when I get set up on whatever it is that I'm using that's AK pattern, right, instead of trying to wrap my gun hand around the pistol grip, I'm going to just disconnect that whole hand. For the most part, the only thing keeping contact is that thumb, right? And that's more or less just a reference. The thumb is super high on the pistol grip itself, pretty much making contact with the receiver. And if you got like a square receiver and that kind of stuff, you'll remind yourself that you're on a square receiver because the corners will poke you, which is fine because it's all good reference, right? So we get up in here and the whole hand is out, right? So now that I have these digits free, they can help me with all the leverage that I could possibly need. If I have a tighter safety that's easier to snick off than one that's a little more loose or used. And again, I like tighter safety levers because I don't want a tree branch snicking my rifle off safe. So a lot of guys will walk up to my rifles or my pistols or whatever it is that I'm using. Like I got a, I'm more than one Chinese Mac at this point. I have a newer one that's stamped. Well, newer as far as usage. But they'll walk up and they'll go to stick my rifles off safe, and they're assuming I have a super loose safety lever, and they'll go to snick it off, and it's much tougher than they thought. And that's because if it's on safe, I really want it on safe. Okay, especially since this safety lever is huge and stuff can snick it off, blah, blah, blah. So when I'm on a gun and I want to make it work, the whole hand gets disconnected. Okay, we set up in a low ready that's conducive to actual, fighting people. So I'm not like all the way down here waiting to get swept or none of that stupid crap. I can see my sighting system, and now I can't. That's the whole difference. I can see my sighting system, now I can't. And the thing is that if you notice this, if you're looking over the top of your optic to where you can't see your reticle or anything like that, this presentation right here, unless you are basically greater than, unless you're greater, inside of like 7 to 10 yards, that's at the floor, right? So unless something's on the floor at 10 yards, you're not sweeping people, okay? And if a situation comes up to where if you are that close, right, and you're in that position and you see something that pops up at that inside distance, right, that you have an issue with possibly sweeping, we're going to get a little bit lower. Now, it's not a surprise that with my ARs, I'm a little bit higher on that presentation, mostly because I don't need like dramatic safety depressions or anything like that. You're using your thumb. For me personally, I'm using an AK, and this has a certain amount of travel with it. So I try to meet at an in-between to where I'm not just barely moving it up, I'm moving with the travel of the safety lever, and then the gun goes, right? So how I'm using this is typically my low ready is a little bit higher with an AR, and it's a little bit lower with an AK, mostly because this has a certain amount of distance to travel, and I try to meet in the middle. So the second that it's all the way down and I'm ready to go, my sights are up. There's more or less no overshooting that you have to deal with, especially if you're trying to go fast. So if we're meeting in the middle versus just trying to pull up while still pushing down and then keep yourself from overshooting, meaning going too high, okay, it's easier to just go with the travel as safety lever itself. So in practice, all we're really looking at here is we're a little bit lower, so that as we're starting to snick the safety lever off, okay, actually I'll leave that just a little bit without the snick. Right there's good. So as we're on our way up, okay, we're coming straight up, and pretty much when that gets all the way to the bottom, we're leveled out, ready to go. So think about how we're doing that in practice, because a lot of times, especially when I see guys trying to go faster, they're trying to set up at a very, very high low ready, if that makes any sense. and they're constantly overshooting their targets, or what it is that they're trying to actually hit, because they'll snap up super fast. They're still pushing down, and that togetherness with how hard we're pushing down doesn't quite meet with how we're trying to push up, and then we have an overshoot. So if we set up a little bit lower, we snatch the gun up on target, and it more or less lands exactly where we want it to. Okay, because I can see through my sighting system, and now I can't. Okay, so we get set here, and we're just trying to meet those together. Does that make sense? So we're going to do a couple more of those, and then we're going to talk about stoppages a little bit. So, God, slipping off stuff. I'm all damp. So it's simple as that. When we're putting the safety back on, it's similar to how we take it off. So we're here, and the gun goes, and then we're getting ready to put the safety back on. Now I have all those digits to help with leverage, and I'm snicking that thing back on. So it's pretty simple as far as safety and manipulation there. I hope that helps. So let's talk about stoppage clearance, right? Now, there's a couple of things that go on with stoppage clearance on AKs. That's just a little bit different than AR counterparts. We see a lot of people not really practicing them because a well-built AK barely if ever stops. It's only once you start getting into really used AKs that we start running into problems. Now, there's a couple of things that go on with AKs that we do need to be cognizant of, though. Especially if you have things like brand new polymer magazines like Circle 10 type, or God forbid you're using Magpul AK magazines, because those are fucking terrible. But a lot of brand new polymer magazines have very, very tight fits on certain rifles depending on what they are. So when we're using those, it helps to understand that when those things are very, very tight, or if you have, like Eastern European AK type magazines that are steel, or Bulgarian steel magazines, or whatever, right? Where just at 30, especially when they're new, at 30, the first insert is real tight because you have extra paint on the side bodies of the magazines, and the springs are brand new, so they're pushing up really, really hard. What you could run into, especially if it's real tight, especially if it's kind of a giant pain in the ass to get that rifle started, is you could have yourself a fail to feed after you fire the first round, because the action's dragging really hard because of the upward pressure of the ammunition inside of that magazine, right? Or if we have, in some cases, very, very used magazines that you can stuff more and dirty rounds into, which is rare, but it can happen. So if you run yourself into a failure to feed, there's a particular format that I'm using as far as AK stoppage clearance and that kind of stuff that to me is just a little bit more effective, and there's less fucking around that is required. So you get yourself a failure to feed on a hold on a second. Oh, I already did that. Okay, so you get yourself failure to feed after that first round. Now, you may know that this is coming if you go to insert that first magazine and it drags and it's very squishy as far as locking into place, or you'll see your your mag catch here just be straight instead of angled like it's supposed to. So you might run into a couple of issues there as far as the first round goes, because again, we're very, very tight here, and if you look closely, I didn't do that time. It wasn't full. Might be able to see it with my bakelite here, but as we're inserting, doesn't show very good. Okay, doesn't show very good on this gun. But point is, though, is that like on fresh magazines, you can actually see in some cases it pushing up on your moving components. So, and that's normal because they're gonna do that because they're full magazines. But on magazines that fit very tight, you'll notice that it's pushing up on them a lot. So a way that we can, there is a tap for AK magazines, by the way, to where if you get that first guy in and it's sort of kind of a squish more than like a very defined click, It isn't straight, obviously, because it's a rock and lock. You just go onto the base plate this way so that we can make sure that it seats all the way. But let's say that we fire that first round, it drags really hard on that incoming ammo source. Stay. And something like that happens, right? Where it just didn't want to feed that first round. There's a couple of things that you can do. What I've noticed is that a lot of times, especially when we get fails to feed and that kind of stuff, unless it barely goes in, what I'm going to try to do first is I'm going to try to just do one of those, okay? Because chances are that's all that really happened. Okay, it was a very heavily stuffed mag. The action got slowed down on the way back. All we really have to do at that point is just, and it's ready to go now, right? But there is another way to do this, in case like it just didn't really want to start at all, to where you notice it's really not feeding hardly anything. So once we get in here, what you visually see is that first rifle round isn't even close to the feed ramp on whatever pattern AK you're using. But it didn't really start anything, right? So let's try one more time. Okay, got it. Let's not breathe on it hard. Okay, so you notice that it didn't even really try to get on the feed ramp, right? So it's really hard to do stoppage demonstrations on AKs. They don't like not working. But what we can do is, instead of sitting there and screwing around with a whole bunch of stuff, which is why I personally just look at AKs, right? If something did not work right, okay, I'm actually going to sit there and I'm going to look at it, because an AK having a stoppage, especially a well-built AK, something went wrong, right? So, and you can make things worse, because if you get failure to feed where it's on the feed ramp and then you go and try and jack the rifle, chances are you can make a worse problem, and now I got to do other stuff. So, for me personally, if I see something like that, and I'm not trying to eject bullets everywhere, they're expensive right now. But if I see something like that, and I looked at it, because this is kind of rare, right, is instead of sitting there and screwing around with trying to move under or whatever, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to look. And what's kind of cool is this is in this position for a reason. It's because dudes came off of Mosin and Gaunts and that kind of stuff. And so I can just make sure that gravity works with me in case crap is about to come out of my rifle, which you'll see this format later. I'm just going to reach up here and go back to work. You'll notice that it works really well. You don't have to do a bunch of moving around and that kind of stuff. I'm not doing a reload right now, and there's no magazine to make exit and then insert, okay? So if I'm clearing stoppage, I'm just going to reach up with the gun hand, make sure I still have leverage over the rest of this crap, and run the action. And you'll notice that as far as making sure that gravity works with you, AKs actually do that pretty well, because it's not like an AR to where I have to work it in this particular space and I got to turn it this way and I got to run a charging handle over here. It's pretty simple to just do something like that and we're back to work. Okay, so that's on like your failure to feed or failures to fire. That works too. Click, no bang, that kind of stuff. There's ammo in a gun. It's real simple. Just kind of make sure that whatever's in there gets out, okay? Action cycles. I don't have to worry about how tired I am or whatever, right? So it's really simple, especially if I get a click, no bang, I can just kind of be like, I can look over, see that my shit's closed and be like, okay, that's fine, no problem. I can just eject whatever was in there. I got to go hunt that one down now. And we're set, right? So that's pretty simple. As far as setting that up and practicing it, it's pretty easy. Empty chamber, all that shit. So that's the well-to-do is easy to achieve on that. So let's talk about this one. Let's talk about stovepipes and junk like that. Because there's a way that this is absolutely not safe to do. Because I've seen it a few times, and it does it with some guns, and it doesn't do that with other guns. But let's talk about this for 1 second. Okay, so real time, generally speaking, if you end up with a Type 2 or a stovepipe where a case sticks out of the action of the rifle, the incoming round more or less is getting shoved down, because when you had to fail to eject, right, that case is impeding the incoming round. So it's not picked up and then seated on a bolt. It's important that we know this, because if you set up a stovepipe like so, I'm going to show you exactly what you should not do, because it is not safe, is if we set up in practice a stovepipe where we have a round seated on the bolt, okay, to where it's, either seating or trying to extract, right? And then we put a case in here, okay, especially with non-spring-loaded firing pins and that kind of stuff. This is enough space for when that hammer drops, it could strike a primer and explode your rifle, because you have an out-of-battery detonation now. Okay, I know specifically for the Draco, it's a non-spring-loaded, so the chances of that actually happening are far greater, and I've seen it more than once. So if you're going to set up a Type 2 stoppage or a stovepipe, do not do this. Do not set up that stoppage where you have a round seated on your bolt, like so, okay, and then stick an empty casing in there. If you drop that hammer, it's very likely, with a non-spring-loaded firing pin, that it will set the primer off, especially if you have heavier springs on your trigger kit or your hammer, like an ALG or something. Okay, so it's something to be very cognizant of when you are setting up these stoppages. Do not do that shit. The way that you set this up safely with AKs across the board is you make sure that your bore or your barrel or whatever is in fact clear. Then you set your loaded magazine in there. Then you stick your case in there. So now there's no possibility that with a round seated on a bolt, that hammer could drop heavy enough for that firing pin to smack that primer, and now your dust cover comes off and all kinds of goofy shit like that happens. You drop the rifle, you're like, holy crap, and stuff like that. People that have ignored me on this before, because they're like, I've done this once or twice at the house, and it's fine, it's never happened before. People that have ignored me on this before would come out to class, and then they would explode their rifle. This happened on 2 occasions. Okay, so don't do that shit. Make sure that your crap is empty, then insert your loaded magazine, then do your stovepipe. Make sense? So now that we've talked about that, let's talk about clearing it. When we're setting it up and clearing it, you notice how I just kind of handled stuff before, where I'm just kind of tilting it and jacking this and all that. Well, there's a second thing there too. With a stovepipe hanging out on there, you notice that it's more or less in line with your charging handle. And I've noticed a lot of really dainty stuff where people are going to kind of like sneak in underneath there and grab it, and then they're going to try and jack your rifle like so and dip it really hard and all kinds of stupid crap. What you can really do instead is, again, we're here, tear all that shit out of there, okay? So I'm running my charging handle and I'm pulling on the casing. I don't really give a shit. I just need that to get loaded. I need the case to come out, and then I need to do my job. Make sense? And let's get the rifle up again. So I'm actually kind of handling this twofold. It's similar to like a pistol sweep on brass, okay? And I'm still running my action. It's in the way of my charging handle, so I'm going to get all up in there and run it. For those of you that are worried about whether or not you'll cut yourself with casing, you have to understand something really fast. And I can already tell that people that are concerned about this, generally speaking, haven't run AKs a lot. And that is, AKs will find a way to cut you. So, whatever. I might have just got myself on that. That's one. And two, running an AK with gloves is just a really good idea. Okay? It's not just for heat and all that other crap. It's because AKs like to cut people. That's just how it goes. That's sort of the consequence, I guess, of the best rifles on the planet being made by slave labor. It's just kind of how it goes. So, we get that cleared and we're good. We're back to work now, right? So, pretty simple stuff, right? So, let's talk about the Type 3. Now, the Type 3 is significantly less complicated when we're starting to talk about like like one-handed stuff and everything else, because the format's very, very similar. Now, setting this up trips a lot of guys up, but you're watching what I'm doing right here. I have the whole rifle just kind of suspended into my chest, action all the way to the rear, taking this guy, setting it right in there, taking my magazine now, okay, coming around your friggin' muzzle so that you don't sweep yourself, inside the gun, and there it is. See, now I can't. Now I can't have that out of battery detonation and everything else, because this incoming round off the magazine is not seated on the bolt. Okay, it's not. So even if for some reason my hammer drops or whatever, it's not going to strike a primer. So that's why this is safe, and you're okay to do this, right? So we get this set. I'm gonna throw my ear protection on here again, but this guy is very similar too. Okay, simply taking the magazine out is not very hard. Okay, get a good grip on the magazine itself, depress this as far as you can, wrench that sucker out of there, and once that guy's out, you really, really do need gravity on this. And as an by the way, I've taught a lot of people how to do this, and I've seen a lot of people teach a lot of people on how to do this, and guys that are just kind of like, just jack the action 1,000 times. It doesn't really work all that good, because when we're sitting here arm barred in like so, if you just jack the action really fast, that round may not have time to get out. So then the bolt's going to slam on that projectile, shove that in there even harder, and now it's locking itself into place as we go. Now we got to get in here and fiddle fuck with things. So once that's out, and that's out of my way and it's gone, all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to yank that sucker, hold, okay? I'll see something pop out of there, and then I can make sure that all of that junk is clear and go back to work. It really is that simple. Okay, with one-handed clearance and everything else, I'm just going to wait for you to come to class and figure that one out, because there's a couple more things that you have to do to make sure that gets cleared in a good fashion. But the reality of the matter is that it is still very simple, and it's way simpler than trying to sit there and fuck around with AR stoppage clearance. Cool thing about AKs is that they don't like to not work. They don't like to, and when there is a problem with them, they tend to be very easy to clear up, because the spaces for clearing stuff out is significantly more loose inside that receiver. So not too bad for a 2-minute shooting rifle. Here's the thing though, right? When you're clearing these stoppages and that kind of stuff, don't be lazy when you're doing it. Make sure that when you do stuff, you make sure that you set up, attempt to fire shots and that kind of stuff, and then go to clear stoppages. Because when for real town AK stoppages hit you, a lot of times because people don't practice them, they're just hit flat-footed, and it takes them entirely too long to clear something very simple. Okay, so make sure that in your practice, you're still attempting to fire those rounds, AKA, shadow boxing. But again, we do want to make sure that we do stuff safe. Okay, so on the Type 2 stoppage, I'm going to say it one more time, make sure that you do not have a round seated on the bolt when you go to put your empty casing in there. Because if you have a round seated on the bolt, and even in some cases, spring-loaded firing pins that can do this too, it's not a whole lot of energy for that hammer to collect when it's falling forward, because everything's further back and there isn't as much for that to fly forward and hit with. But it can still happen, and I've seen top covers explode off of rifles and that kind of stuff in the past. So make sure that if you're doing the Type 2, you clear the thing first, then insert your magazine, and then insert the empty case. Do not have a round seated on the bolt. Do not load your rifle and then simply jack the action back a little bit and insert an empty case. This will reduce the number of stitches that are required in your life, and it'll make sure that your rifle keeps going too. So If you guys have any issues, if you guys have any questions on this, feel free to comment in the comment section below. If you guys want to come out and train with us, we have a whole bunch of stuff available and that we're scheduled out to September. I'm working on Pennsylvania again, so Pennsylvania people, just relax. Just relax, okay? I'm working on it. For those of you that don't know, I'm going to Georgia and Florida for pistol courses and that kind of stuff. We're doing another 2 classes out here. This month it's vehicle, and next month, well, I don't think next month, but a few months after that, actually, we're coming back out here to Drakesboro, Kentucky to run a mechanical set. So if you guys want to come out and train with us, you absolutely can. For those of you that want to support us on Patreon, number 1, I'm extremely grateful for that because it allows me to continue doing this nonsense. And 2, for those of you that want to be benefited from that, if you spend $41 a month with us, you can come out and train with us as much as you want to without having to pay any additional, tuition fee as far as the courses go. Except for vehicle classes, and that's only because of logistics. I have to bring the things in and then dispose of them. Sorry. That's a full pricer. Everything else, if you're signed up $41 a month, you can come out and train with us as much as you want to. Especially considering the current climate, I would highly suggest being as trained as possible. Make sense? Do it. If it's not with me, do this with someone else. But get out and get trained. Know what you're doing now that you got, your new piece and all that, because we're noticing a ton of brand new people, which is fantastic. So if you're brand new and if you've been watching this crap on YouTube for a little while, you need to go to class. I don't care if it's with me. Go somewhere that doesn't suck and you're fine. Make sense? So, as a note, by the way, we're also on Facebook. Okay, we got a fan page on there. So if you want to peruse that and ask questions or do whatever, that's all on you. Links for all of this are in the description below. And with that being said, guys, remember, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.